Hello all, my name is Krish Naik and welcome to my YouTube channel. So first of all guys, a very happy Teachers Day to every one of you out there. In this particular video, we are going to continue the discussion with respect to GitHub Actions. We are going to develop an amazing end-to-end project with an automated workflow wherein we develop a Flask application, a simple Flask application, and then we try to convert that into a Docker image. And after converting into a Docker image, we try to deploy that or push that into the Docker Hub. Now this entire process will be completely automated with the CI/CD pipelines that we are going to develop with the help of GitHub Actions. Now already in my previous video, I have discussed a lot about GitHub Actions, what exactly it is, and I've taken some of the examples. As we go ahead, I will be showing you all the deployment techniques with respect to different clouds. So let's go ahead and understand this entire automated workflow where we work with Docker images and we try to push this in the Docker Hub. This will be a great example to show you about continuous integration and continuous deployment, right? So yes, this video will be also somewhere around 40 to 45 minutes. So go ahead and see the entire video. And if you want to probably learn from me, I already have a lot of affordable Udemy courses. You can probably check all the links in the description of this particular video. So let's go ahead and enjoy the video. Thank you. Hello guys. So we are going to continue a discussion with respect to GitHub Actions. And in this video, we are going to see a new workflow, which we are going to implement it as a complete end-to-end project. And the best thing will be that in this project, we will be having both CI/CD pipeline, a kind of CI/CD pipeline, because we really want to start from the basic things. So this example would be an amazing example altogether. So what we are basically going to do in this example, it is very simple. First of all, we are going to create a Flask app. Okay. So continuous integration, whenever we say continuous integration, that basically means, let's imagine that we are developing a data science project, which requires to develop a Flask app, right? In the Flask app, usually many developers work. Now, with respect to any stories that I create in Flask app, I am going to create a unit test cases. And once we probably commit the code, once we push the code into the main branch, my unit test cases should run and it should also build, right? So after this is done, we go to the next step wherein we build the entire artifact. And again, we do this unit testing as we go ahead, right? So in our GitHub action workflow, the first step is nothing but build and test. Here, we are basically going to implement our continuous integration. After we do the build and test, what we really need to do is that in this build and test, we also will be creating our Docker image, right? So the Docker image will be created for this entire application, right? This will be the most amazing thing. An entire Docker image will be created in a container, specifically considering Linux. Again, it depends like what kind of OS you really want to use as a container for building this entire Docker image. I will specifically take a Linux version. Once I probably create a Docker image, once I validate this Docker image, once everything is working fine, then the next step we specifically go with deployment. And that is where your continuous deployment will work. Now, where we really need to deploy this. See, this Docker image usually specifically deployed in Docker Hub, right? So Docker Hub is a public repository for the Docker image. Once you deploy in this Docker Hub, then anybody can pull that particular Docker image and can probably execute in their local machine if they have Docker installed, right? So this entire process will be doing it. And the best thing over here is that whenever we are doing the deployment, here we also need to create some secret keys. Okay, some of the secret keys in this example, we will be specifically using like Docker username, and the second one that we will be specifically using is Docker password, right? So Docker password is nothing but we will try to generate a token from the Docker Hub itself. So I will be showing you each and every step as we go ahead, and this will be a perfect example of implementing a developer workflow, because here we are just not implementing continuous integration. We are also focusing on the deployment part, wherein we take the entire image and we deploy it directly into the Docker Hub, and we'll automate this entire process. No manual activity will be there. Here, the additional things that we are going to use, tools that we are going to use are nothing but Git. Second one is GitHub, right? GitHub repository. The third one that we are specifically going to use over here is Dockers, right? Dockers. And we'll also be using PyTest for our unit testing. Along with this, we will be using Flask to develop our application. So we will be starting from completely basics, and we'll create the repository, we'll commit the code, each and everything we'll be doing as we go ahead. So let's go ahead and check out this amazing project. Hello guys, so finally we are going to go ahead and implement this entire workflow, what we have specifically discussed. So step by step we'll be going ahead, so let me just go ahead and minimize this. First of all, this is the folder location that I'm going to work with. So here is something called as Docker image. I will just go ahead and open my VS Code. You can either open it from here or you can open it from terminal, okay? So once we specifically open this entire terminal, the first thing is that I will go ahead and create my requirements.txt file just to make sure that what all requirements I'm going to use. As you all know, the two important requirements that I'm actually going to use. One is I'm planning to create a Flask app. So Flask will be there. Along with that, we also need to perform unit testing. So this PyTest will also be there. Okay. So this is my requirement.txt file. Let me just go ahead and write the spelling correctly. Okay. Now, after creating the requirement.txt, I also require my app.py file. Here, my Flask app will be written. Along with this, I will also create my unit test cases. So see, one very important thing about unit test cases is that if this PyTest library that we have imported, right? If we really need to identify all the unit test cases, you need to probably create your file name beginning with test. Okay. Test underscore. So any file that you probably begin or any folder that you probably begin with test, right? It is automatically going to probably consider that as a unit testing files, right? So here I'm going to probably write test underscore app.py, and here I'm going to probably go ahead and create all my unit testing things that I actually require. Okay. So all my code related to unit testing will be developed over here. Okay. Along with this, I also require a Dockerfile. So let me just go ahead and create my Dockerfile over here so that I will be able to create the image from this Dockerfile. Along with this, I will quickly go ahead and write .github workflow. All right. So I have to probably create this particular folders, that is .github workflows, because here is what I will go ahead and create my YAML file. So I will go ahead and write CICD.YAML file, which will be my continuous integration and continuous deployment .YAML file. Okay. So all these files are ready. We are good to go. Let me do one more thing. Let me quickly go ahead and create one more file, which is called as .getignore. Okay. Because I don't want to commit each and everything that will be occurring over here. Right. What you can also do over here is that once you go ahead and create this file, you may also want to create your environments, right? So whenever you are specifically working in a bigger project, we basically go ahead and create an environment. So let us go ahead into our terminal, and here I'm just going to open my command prompt, and let's quickly go ahead and create our environment. So first of all, I will say conda deactivate. Okay, for every project, it is a very good idea that we create a separate environment altogether. So I'm going to write conda create -p VNV Python with some version. Let's say the version is 3.10, any version that you can specifically use. Now, once this environment will be created, your VNV folder will get created over here, right? So in this getignore, whenever I'm committing the code, I have to make sure that I don't take this VNV folder, right? So I don't want this VNV folder. So I can just go ahead and write this like this, right? So let's first of all write like this. And because once we go ahead and initialize this entire repository and commit this code in our GitHub, right? I don't want my VNV folder to go, right? Other than this, I want each and every folder like .github, every files, I basically want all these things to probably go into the GitHub repository, right? So these are some of the basic things. Now I have also done this. Then once we go ahead and create our environment, and then what we really need to do is that we need to activate the environment. So let's go ahead and activate it. So I'll write conda activate VNV. Okay. Now after activating the environment, the next thing that I'm actually going to do is that I'm going to install my requirement.txt. Okay. So we will go ahead and proceed with the requirement.txt. See, directly you can also go ahead and just put your code in the GitHub repository, right? Everything you can probably do it, but it is always a good way, because whenever we are developing an end-to-end project, this way we have to probably do with all our IDE, right? So perfect. I've also created my git ignore. V is put up over here. Everything is perfect over here. Now my environment is also loaded. All I have to do is that I have to go ahead and write my app.py and test.py code, app.py code. Okay. Now this is done. Now in my next setup, what I really need to do is that I need to go ahead and set up my GitHub repository. So guys, we are going to continue a discussion with respect to this particular workflow where we are going to create our Docker image and deploy it into a Docker Hub. We are going to automate that entire process. In our previous video, we have already done this project setup. Now the next thing is that we will go ahead and create our GitHub repository. Okay. Now, in order to create a GitHub repository, I will go ahead and click on new repository. Again, you need to have a GitHub account. So please make sure that you create this specific account. And let's say that I'm just going to write Docker image hub, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and write this. I'll keep this as private because I don't want to probably expose it to everyone. I will not select any of the option over here, description, add a git ignore, everything. I'll keep it as empty because I'm going to create all these files and I'm going to start. Okay. So let's go ahead and create the repository over here. So once I create the repository, so this is what I'm able to get, right? Now, first of all, let me go ahead and create my README file over here. So I will go to my code and create my README file. So readme.md file. Okay. So I will say, hey, this project shows how to work with GitHub action. Okay. So something like this. I'm just going to write some description. Okay, perfect. This is all good. Now, once we have all these things, I'm going to clear the screen. And first of all, you just need to follow this, right? If I really want to make this repository where I'm actually going to commit, first of all, the command is nothing but git init. Git init basically means we're going to initialize the git init, initialize this repository for that, right? So this basically creates a .git folder. After we do this, the next step is nothing but we are going to add README. I will not add README. Instead, I will go ahead and add each and every file. And here you can probably see with respect to git ignore, this venv file is not considered. And this .github, cicd.yaml, all these files, cicd YAML file is currently empty, but I'm just going to go ahead and do the publish. But venv file will not be, folder will not come because in the git ignore, I have given this venv folder, right? And let's do one thing. I will just go ahead and commit it. Okay, so let's go ahead and write git add dot. Okay, and then I will go ahead and commit my entire code. Git commit -m. This is my first commit. Okay, this is my first commit. So all the files will be committed in my remote repository. Okay, now from this remote repository, I need to go ahead and first of all create a branch. So here I will go ahead and write git branch -m main. So once we do this, then we are going to configure our remote repository to this particular origin, which is probably given by this GitHub repository itself, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste it. Once this is done, we are into the right repository. Now we can go ahead and push all our commit inside this. So once we push it, you'll be able to see all this all this content that I have written, all these files will automatically get added over here. So if I reload this, you'll be able to find out this entire project structure with .github workflows, each and everything. Now still my GitHub workflow cicd.yaml is completely empty. I don't have anything. I still don't have anything in my app.py or test_app.py. I just have this requirement.txt, which I have over here. Okay. Now, step by step, we will go ahead and implement in the upcoming video. So what we are going to do is that in the next series of video, we are going to probably develop our entire project. And then we'll go ahead and create our Dockerfile. Along with that, we'll also go ahead and create our test_app.py file. And once we commit the code, and once we design this, once we write our entire YAML structure, right? YAML structure for the GitHub action workflow. This is where we are going to design our GitHub action workflow. So guys, finally, now let's go ahead and implement our app.py. So here, what I'm actually going to do is that I will go ahead and write from Flask, import Flask, okay? And here I'll just create a basic Flask app, okay? Just to show you an example. So here I will be having __name __, okay? And there I'm going to basically go ahead and create my app.route. And this app.route will be for my home page / and here I have my definition home, okay? And I'm just going to say, hey, return something like hello world. So once I go to the home page, it should return hello world. That's it, okay? That's it. And here I'm going to basically go ahead and write if underscore underscore name underscore underscore double equal to underscore underscore main underscore underscore. Then we're going to basically go ahead and write app.run. By default, my host IP address will be nothing but 0.0.0.0 and my port will be nothing but it will be equal to 5000. Okay, so by default I'm giving the port as 5000. So this is my entire app. If you probably want to run this app, it's very simple. Just go to the terminal, okay, close this, okay, and from here you can just go ahead and write python app.py. so it should definitely run. I will click on allow access. If I click on this link, so I should be able to see my application. So this application basically displays about hello world. Perfect. Now my aim is just not to create this particular application, but I really want to convert this into a Docker image and can deploy this into the Docker Hub. But before that, I also need to make sure that I write my test cases, right? So in order to write the test cases, I have already created my test underscore app.py file, right? Now here, what I will do is that I will quickly go ahead and write from app import app, right? So we are going to from this particular app.py file, I'm going to import the app itself, this app, right? And after we import this app, I will just go ahead and create one function, which is like text underscore home. And understand, always remember, if my PyTest library needs to find out which are the test use cases or which are the function, we really need to go ahead and write test over here. We need to start any function, we need to start any file name with a test underscore, okay? And then we have our test underscore home. Then I will go ahead and write response. So let's go ahead and take our response. Here I'm just going to write app.test underscore client. So there is a function called as test underscore client dot get, okay? And here we are just going to get from the home page. Once we do this, this app is just going to give you some kind of response. And here the major response that we need to check is by using this assert statement. So here if I go ahead and write assert dot status code is double equal to 200, right? So this basically indicates that this is a successful request. Then again, I will go ahead and write assert response dot data double equal to, here I will just go ahead and write some message saying that hello world, right? So this is just one type of test case that I'm actually trying to check, okay? So I have written my app.py, I have written my test cases over here, and this PyTest will automatically find out which all are there because it will just look for this particular file name and the function name itself, okay? Now, after doing this, we have to probably go ahead and create our Dockers, right? So Dockerfile is over here. Now, what I'm actually going to do is that I'm going to use a Docker, which we have already discussed in my Docker series of videos. So here I'm going to use the Python image from the Docker Hub, which is nothing but Python 3.9 Slim. Then we are going to set a working directory, that is /app. Then we are going to copy from this current location to this entire /app. Then we are going to run pip install Flask. Along with this, what I will also do is that since we are planning to create a Docker file altogether, right? This Flask app will be useful for running this entire code, okay? Then we are going to expose the port 5000. And finally, we are going to run this app.py when the container launches. So for this, we will be using a command python app.py. I hope everybody is familiar of creating this particular Docker file, which is already covered in my series of videos with respect to Docker. And I hope you can probably see the module also, right? So this Docker file actually helps you to create a Docker image of this entire application. That is nothing but app.py, okay? So perfect. This is all done. Here we have entirely designed our entire app. Docker file is ready. Test underscore app.py file is ready. Now in the next section, we are going to go ahead and write our CI/CD YAML file. Okay. Now we are just going to see that how we will go ahead and write, and each and everything we will go ahead and discuss what all things are there. Because two main things I'm going to focus on my workflow. One is build and test, and one is deploy. In build and test, I need to be doing the building part. I need to install the libraries, and for testing, I need to install PyTest, right? Both these things needs to get executed in some Linux container, Ubuntu latest, and then we go ahead and deploy it. For deploying, we need to configure our Docker username and Docker password, which are my secret keys, which you have an option to put it in the GitHub itself. And then finally, we'll go ahead and deploy in the Docker Hub. After we deploy that in the Docker Hub, we'll also pull that particular image and we'll try to see whether it is working fine or not. Hello guys, so finally we are going to now create our YAML file, which I've actually named it as CI/CD YAML. So let's go ahead, and again, if you remember, what is our aim? Our aim is very simple. We really need to create a workflow which will actually help us to build and test the entire application. Along with that, we will also try to create a continuous deployment where it will try to deploy the entire application in the form of Docker image into the Docker Hub, right? So that anybody can use those specific images. So let us go ahead, and first of all, as you all know, we have to start our YAML file with a name. So here I'm going to give a name called as CI/CD for Dockerized Flask app. Okay. So once this is specifically done, then I will go ahead and talk about on which events we really need to trigger the workflow. So here for this, I will going to specifically use over here as on push of branches on main and pull request on branches of main. Then if I probably, first of all, let me do one thing, and let me just go ahead and copy this entire thing over here so that it'll become easy for you all to understand. Okay. So let's talk more about this. So for this, I will just open my pen. Let me do one thing. Let me clearly explain this. Okay. So first of all, here you can actually see that we have to probably start with the name, right? So name of the workflow that we are specifically using. This is CI/CD for Dockerized Flask app, right? On which events we need to trigger it. So here I'm actually using two events. One is push, one is pull request. On which branches? Main branch. Okay. Then you have jobs. Now in jobs, we are going to use two specific jobs, right? One is build and test. Build and test is basically to run your unit testing, right? Unit testing. And here also we are specifically using this container, that is your Ubuntu latest container. In this, you will be able to see the steps. So job, this is my job name. Okay. And it runs on Ubuntu latest. Then we can specify steps one by one. The first step is basically to check out the code from the repository. The second step is to set up the Python repository. So here you can see, Python version we are going to probably use inside the container. So here we are going to use this action setup Python @version 4. Now previous example, we have seen version 2. Similarly, version 4 is there, version 3 is there, but I would suggest go ahead and use the recent version. And here we are going to use the Python version 3.9. Okay. You can also use 3.10. It is up to you. Okay. So this is the most important thing with respect to the jobs. Now, if I go ahead, then if you go ahead and see, okay, after this, the next steps that we have actually mentioned inside this, right? The steps actually specifies about the workflow. Okay. So here we are going to install the dependencies. First, we are upgrading all the pip. Then we are installing Flask and we are installing PyTest. Instead of this, you can also go ahead and install the requirement.txt directly by mentioning Flask and PyTest over there. But one by one, we have specifically installed. And then we are going to create one more workflow step, that is run test, and we are going to run PyTest. So PyTest, what it is basically going to do, wherever there is a file with the name starting with test underscore and the function which is there, which is starting as text underscore, it will consider all those as the unit test cases. Now this is one of the job. Okay. So this entirely one of the job which I am specifying as build and test. So if you probably see in the diagram, in this build and test, what all things are basically happening. Clearly, you can probably see over here. We are first of all running it on the Ubuntu latest container. Then we are checking out the code from the repository. We are setting up the Python with 3.9. We are installing all the dependencies and we are running PyTest. So this in short is doing the build and running all the unit test cases. Now in the second one, we have something called as build and publish. Okay. So this is the name that you can specify. You can specify any name, right? It is up to you. It is need not be always same, right? So here I'm basically saying build and publish. Publish your Docker image into the Docker Hub. Okay. So here you need build and test. That basically means, see, this need keyword is very important. Okay. This is basically saying that you need to first of all perform build and test. After you perform this, then only you have to start this. Okay. If you remove this, both can start parallelly. Okay. And this also runs on Ubuntu latest. And then here you have steps, name, checkout, code at v3. Then you're setting up Docker Buildx. Okay. And this is GitHub action provides you in order to set up the Docker, it will provide you like how you can probably check out the code repository. Similarly, there will be a action for this also. Okay. And our main aim is this, right? We want to probably take that entire Docker image, we want to build it, and then we want to push it to the Docker Hub, right? Then you have this one over here. So let me just go ahead and see this. So this is nothing but you're logging to your Docker Hub. For logging to a Docker Hub, we have another action, which is again provided by the GitHub action. You can just Google it or see the documentation of the Docker Hub itself. You'll be able to get. Here we are going to specify two important things. One is the secret.docker user underscore name. Okay. And then you have secrets.docker underscore password. Now this is the most important thing. From where do you get the Docker underscore username and Docker underscore password? Let me just go ahead and show it to you. So first of all, what we are basically going to do is that I'm going to go ahead in Docker, and I'm going to log in over here, right? So let's say this is the hub.docker.com. I will just go ahead and log in over here. And if you remember, I've already covered in my Docker series. In the Docker Hub, you can publish any kind of Docker image that you want, and it will be accessible for everyone, right? So here you can see, I can probably see all the repositories. You have to probably log in inside this. Okay. Now, in order to get your username and password, username is nothing but, it is nothing but this same username, right? In order to get the password, you need to create a token. So I will go to account settings. After going to the account settings, you can probably see there is something called as personal access token. Okay. So you have to go ahead and click on this, and you can go ahead and generate a new token. So here I will generate a new token. I'll say Docker image test. Okay. And please make sure that it should have this read and write and delete option. It is good so that you can directly publish it in the Docker Hub. If you want to delete it, you can directly delete it, or you can write anything. So I'll go ahead and click on generate. Okay. So once this is generated, so this is my personal access token. Okay. Now, if I have this personal access token, that basically means in my Docker Hub, I will be able to upload all the images. And these are some of the images that I have already uploaded. Okay. And this images plays a very big role because you can directly access this image and run my entire application. So I will copy this, then I will go to my GitHub, and here you have something called as settings. Okay. After you have the settings, if you go down, there will be something called as secret and variables. Okay. And inside the secret and variables, you have something called as actions. Now here inside the actions, we will go ahead and create secret keys. Okay. The reason why we are creating secret key, because it is very simple. If you go ahead and see over here, I have to create two secret key, Docker underscore username and Docker underscore password. And this is probably coming from this GitHub secret key itself. So I will go ahead and select this, and I will create a new secret key. I will go ahead and paste it over here. Let me go ahead and write my username. That is nothing but Krish Naik 06. I will go ahead and add the secret. And then I will go ahead and create a new repository secret. The new repository secret will be nothing but Docker underscore password. And this time I'll paste it over here, and I can take my password prompt or password access token from here. I'll copy and paste it over here, right? So this is done. So here you have these two secret keys that is readily available. And now the code, the GitHub actions will be able to access this once we update the YAML file, right? So this is the first step. So that basically means we are able to access this both Docker underscore username and Docker underscore password. Okay. Now this is with respect to the step which is called as build and publish. Okay. Build and publish. Now inside this build and publish, step-by-step workflow, this will happen. First of all, we are going to check out the repository. Then we are going to build up the Docker itself. We are going to log in into the Docker with the secret username and password that is given over there. And after this, you will also be able to see that we are going to build and push the Docker image. So for this also a separate action is there, right? So Docker build push action at v4. Similarly, over here for login, you have login action at v2. This is already provided by Docker itself, by GitHub action itself. All these uses are there, right? Then we will go ahead and write with context dot, okay. And I'll say push is equal to true, and we'll assign a tag name, and I'll say, hey, we want to probably do this Flask test app. We just need to use the username, and we'll use /Flask test app latest, and it will automatically deploy. Understand the naming convention of the Docker should be in this way, where you should be getting your username over here, and then whatever name you want, and it should end with latest or any version that you specifically want. Okay. So this is a very important thing, right? We are just trying to push the Docker image into the Docker Hub. I'll show you this entire implementation. You'll be able to understand. And then finally, I'm just creating one more important step in this workflow where I'm echoing some of the information that comes over here from this particular digest, right? Steps.build and publish.output.digest. Let's see what it displays. So this was the entire YAML file that I've actually created. Now what I will do, quickly, I will open my terminal and I will push this. Okay, I'll push this entire thing. So first of all, I will just go ahead and write git add dot, okay, then git commit -m. I will go ahead and say docker CI/CD YAML file is ready, okay, and I will just go ahead and commit this. Okay, so 4 files is changed, 91 insertions. You can see over here Docker CI/CD file is ready. Everything is ready over here and we are good to go with respect to this. Then I will go ahead and write git push -u from origin to main. Okay, so once I push this, the entire push is basically done. Now, as soon as I go back over here, I think your actions should start working. See, and your actions have started. See, your actions have clearly started. I will just go ahead and execute this. Okay, perfect. So this is build and test, and your build and test is working fine. See, check out code repository, setting up Python, install dependencies, run test, everything has happened. Now we are into the build and publish, right? So with respect to the build and publish, it is now checking out the code. Now see, this entire installation is basically happening. Okay, Buildx failed to solve to read Dockerfile. Okay, it's this file name, open Dockerfile, no such file and directory. Let's see what is the problem over here, and I will try to solve this problem. Okay, so one problem that I probably see over here is that I have not mentioned my Docker file name. Okay, so over here we are giving this Docker username. We are saying that, hey, push is equal to true. One thing I missed out, we really need to provide the Docker file over here itself, and based on that only it will try to push it. So let's see what was the changes over here. So here one more parameter I really need to give is nothing but file : ./Dockerfile. Okay, I need to specify my Docker file name. That's it. If I see, I can probably see this. You can obviously you can see the login to the Docker Hub is done. Run Docker build push action. This is done. GitHub action runtime ACG is done. Info we are getting it, but we could not get the Docker file itself, right? Because the path was not mentioned in the YAML file, right? So that is the reason you can see failed to solve. We are not able to open the Docker file. No such file and directory. Okay, so if you are getting this error, don't worry. Okay, it usually happens. Okay, you need to fix it. Okay, so here you have /Dockerfile. Now let me just go ahead and commit it again. I will go ahead and write git add dot git commit -m Dockerfile specified in the specified. Okay, and here I will go ahead and write git push -u from origin to main. Okay, so once I do this, now all this commit is done. Now it should run again. See, let me go up. Oh my god, I have to go up. Now if I go to the action, so this has failed one time. Okay, I think before also it has failed. Okay, but it's okay. Now it should work. Okay, so build and test, this should work successfully. It is able to run all the tests. Let's see how many tests it is able to run. See, test_app.py, it is able to pass this entire test. Now once we are into the build push, it has logged in. Now we are extracting the entire Docker, and just observe this. Okay, we have Flask app, right? And my app name was Flask test, right? So see, everything is basically happening. Let's see. We'll just minimize all these things so that you can clearly see. Okay, so these are the steps that is basically happening in this build and publish, right? So first of all, we are setting up the job. In the setting up the job, we are running the version, this operating system. This is already handled by that. We are checking out the code, right, by using this checkout @version 3. Then we are setting up the Docker Buildx. We are running this action completely to build a Docker within the container. We are logging into the Docker Hub, which is successful, right? Because I have provided a secret username and password. And finally, we are building and pushing the Docker image. See, Docker info, it is getting all the information. It is probably from this Docker hub. It is basically directly into the Docker hub. It is directly publishing, and we have automated that entire process. Before it was like we had to write a lot of command, right? And here you can see the name Flask test dash app pull, right? Push. So this will basically be my app name or image name that will be available over there, right? So this is done. Then I have my image digest, will echo some information. This is what it is basically echoing. Then post build and push Docker image. So post job cleanup. So we are pushing this entirely. Post login to Docker hub, post job cleanup. So now we have logged out. See, this is also very nice, right? The checkout code, the action code of Docker, and this is that after logging into the Docker, after pushing it, we also log out, right? Then post setup Docker Buildx, post job cleanup, where we are cleaning up all the certificates. And finally, we have this post checkout code. So this entire process has been automated. Now, the best thing will be that if I just go ahead and reload it, you'll be able to see my new Docker image will be available over here. Flask test app, right? So here is my new image that is specifically available, right? Now, in order to call this image, it is very simple. I will just go ahead and open my command prompt. Okay, I'll call it in my local. See this, okay? So I will just say, hey, go ahead and execute this command. I will write Docker pull Krish Naik 06 / Flask test app, right? So once I pull this, what is basically going to happen? With the latest version, is just going to pull it, and then we can specifically run this, okay? So now already exists, Flask test, see, pull complete, everything is done, right? Now, I think you should be able to see this. You should be able to see this. Let me just, in my Docker desktop, right? So in my Docker desktop, still you're not able to see, but if I go to the images, you should be able to see over here, Flask test, right? And just now 3 minutes back, you can see that 136 MB. Now, if I want to run this, how do I run it? Which I have already shown you. In order to run it, I will go ahead and write Docker run -p. The local port that host port that I'm actually going to take is 5000. And since this is going to run in the container, from the container port, I will expose it to 5000. Okay. And then I will write Krish Naik 06 / whatever is the app name. So I will go ahead and write Flask test app and latest. Okay. Once I execute this, now here you have this. All I have to do is that just go to my local host. So let's open my browser over here, and I'm running this in 5000. If I execute it, this is my hello world. Now this, what I'm accessing is directly from the container, right? The same container which I have actually deployed over there in my Docker hub, right? I've actually started that, and here also you can basically see. Now, if I go ahead and see in the container, this is running. Flask test app is running in 5000, right? So this is the entire workflow, and we have automated this entire workflow. Now, any changes that specifically happens over here, it is going to build the entire Docker, and it is going to probably do each and everything, and it is going to push that entire Docker image over there, right? And I hope you have just got an idea like how to specifically work like this. Here we have done this Buildx and all. We also have some code where we can build it manually, but since we had this action command, I thought of using this, right? But I'll give you an assignment. Try to just explore the page, try to explore the documentation, try to find out how do you build this directly, okay? If I want to really build it, I can also do this build, right? If I really want it, okay? Let's say that I want to go ahead and do the build. I can actually create another workflow, another job over here, which will just build my Docker image and see whether everything is fine. Let's do that, okay? Let's do that also, so that you are much more comfortable. So what I will do over here, like I have build and test, I have build and publish. Let me go ahead and create one more build, okay? So I will just go ahead and write something like this. So this will be my another job, which will be looking like this, okay? So here, let me just go ahead and write, okay? So this is my job. Just a second. There is some issues. Always remember one thing, guys, okay? Whenever you are actually writing any kind of build, you have to also maintain this kind of spacings with respect to the YAML file, okay? If it does not happen, like then it will be a problem, right? So I will go ahead and write runs on. Okay. So this also I will try to run it on Ubuntu latest. And then I'm going to probably go ahead with the steps. Now inside my steps, the first step that I'm going to use is which thing it uses. Let's say I'm going to use the action checkout 4 version 4. Okay, I will just go ahead and check out the version 4. Okay, and after this I will give a name. Name will be just like build a Docker image. Okay, we can also build it. I'm also automating this entire process. Build a Docker image after name, and then finally we go ahead and run this command, right? So we need to run it, right? If you see over here, we have also defined this kind of run. Okay, so inside the run command, we will go ahead and write Docker build dot dash dash whatever file I have, and this will be my Docker file. The name of the Docker file dash dash tag with some tag over here. Workflow, let's say workflow test I'm just giving. Okay, just to see whether it is basically building or not, right? And here I will also specify some date plus %s. Okay, thus I think this will be more than sufficient. Okay, and we should be able to use this. Now let's see whether this will also work or not. I just want to try it out. Here we are also doing the Docker build. So here I will write Docker build. Then we have this build and test, another job, and build and publish is also another job. Okay. Then, and always remember guys, you don't need to buy hard this. Okay. Be smart enough. When you do the Google, if you see the documentation, you'll be getting a lot of different YAML files for different purpose. And as we go ahead, I will also try to do the deployment in AWS cloud and all. Okay. We'll see that. So now I'm going to write git add dot, then I will go and write git commit -m. So here what we are basically doing is that Docker build. Okay, Docker build we are adding. So I will just go ahead and write whatever git push -u origin to main. Okay, done. So now I think it should run. So let me go back to the actions now. So this is my Docker build. Now 3 important things will learn. See, Docker build and test is running parallelly. Okay. I did not write any dependency. If I had written any dependency, then build test would have run later on. But I'm interested towards this, right? To see whether the Docker is basically getting built or not. So here you can see my Docker is basically getting built and it is good enough, right? Nice. My entire Docker build is basically happening automatically in the container itself. That is the reason why I like this GitHub Actions a lot. You know, the entire process can be automated. So we are building things, we are testing things, we are automating things over here. You know, so anybody who's making a commit, if we make some changes in the Docker file, and if that build is not happening, it will break it down, and then we will not be merging the code itself. Automatically the error will come, right? That is the most amazing thing. So this is entirely done. Now, if I go ahead and see, so this will basically be my Docker app. Okay. Anyhow, I will close this. Let me just go ahead and close this. So I will close it from here, my command prompt, and let me just stop it. Okay. This entire Docker image. Perfect. So I hope you were able to understand this particular video. This was about creating an amazing workflow. Now, as we go ahead, we'll be seeing more different workflows. But the main thing will be that we'll try to implement all these things along with our end-to-end projects. So yes, this was it from my side. I will see you in the next video. Thank you.